Blessings, beloveds. Welcome back to my channel, Anastasia, Cosmic Astrologer with you. Okay, guys, so I posted a video a couple of days ago and I made an error in the two people's charts that I use. So this is a remaking of that video. So anyway, this video is going to be about transiting Pluto showing up very prominently when you're assessing a composite chart. So first of all, let me just explain what a composite chart is for those of you that don't know. There is an area of astrology which would be defined as relationship astrology. Now, with relationship astrology, two of the main techniques or principles that I use is something called a composite chart and something called a synastry chart. The composite chart is the focus for today, so I'll just quickly frame what a composite chart is and how it's created. A composite chart is something that is born of two people coming together. So a composite chart is not an actual birth chart. It's not based on a time and a location and a date of birth, as is a normal natal birth chart. A composite chart is made up of, as I said, two people uniting together. That relationship of the two people is what creates a composite chart. So for instance, when you draw up a composite chart through a computer software that you're using, you will put in John's details, and then you will put in Susie's details, and then you will hit composite chart, okay? And that will basically calculate a chart that is called the composite chart. And what it is this: it's actually looking at, essentially it's assessing the midpoint of one person's sun to the other person's sun, and it's bringing that midpoint is what creates the sun in the composite chart. So a composite chart doesn't have two suns or two Mercuries or two Venuses. You just see everything drawn coming in together, presenting as though it's a birth chart, but what it is the midpoint of person A's sun to person B's sun. That midpoint becomes the composite sun. And likewise with the case of Mercury to Mercury, Venus to Venus, Mars to Mars, Jupiter to Jupiter, etc., etc. So the composite chart is the midpoints of person A's and person B's planets, and those midpoints create what appears to be a birth chart, but it is not a birth chart. What it is, however, is it is the overall dynamic and energy exchange between the two souls that come together, basically the energies that define the relationship. So the composite chart is an entity unto itself, you could say, because it is literally the embodiment of two souls uniting, two people coming together in the form of a relationship. Now, you can do a composite chart for many different relationships. It doesn't just have to be intimate. It can be the relationship between you and your mother, you and your best friend, you and your employer, anybody, right? Because a relationship is anything that brings two people together, really. There's just different ways of experiencing or exploring or expressing the relationship. But in today's example, what I really want to highlight and bring to your awareness is the composite chart of two people coming together in an intimate relationship. That's a very specific composite chart that I want to focus on today. And okay, so hopefully you understand what a composite chart is now if you didn't before. That's obviously a summary explanation, but all you need to understand is the two people coming together creates the one chart. That one chart is the entity of the union of the two souls coming together. Right, so what I have experienced and seen through the years is that transiting Pluto is often showing up when it comes to two people coming together in a relationship. It could be when they meet, it could be perhaps when they marry, but when there is something, a really important component of it could be the beginning of the relationship, but clearly that's an important process, that's the beginning. But if in the case of, I use the example of Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, and thank you to the viewer who commented on my previous video and alerted me to the fact that I had actually used Prince William. That was an error on my part, and admittedly that day I was quite exhausted. I had a bit of brain fog, and I had Prince William, Prince Harry, I had Princess Thing, I had all these charts on my little system there, and I just clicked the wrong chart. And it's interesting because the energies between William and Meghan showed up quite a few things. But anyway, that's not important because they're not together. So the focus again today, in terms of using a chart example, I can bring in Harry and Meghan, because I did actually look at their charts today. And transiting Pluto was hitting off some pretty significant things in their composite chart when they met and when they married as well. So it's still there, but it's just there from a very different perspective to the one that I made an error in when I used William instead of Harry. So I'll show you that in a moment. But the point to this video is that it is a very interesting exercise to do yourself. So whether it's in your own life, in your current relationship, or whether it's assessing previous relationships. The point I'm trying to make is that Pluto rules things that appear, reappear from the past, rather. So, well, first of all, let's just talk a little bit about Pluto's energy. Now, in evolutionary astrology, Pluto is the soul. So the deepest unconscious desires that we have, that pretty dominates our unconscious behavior, really comes from Pluto. It comes from the moon as well. The moon is certainly connected, but it is Pluto that has those deeper, greater desires, because the desires that are connected to Pluto are basically about your evolution, your consciousness expanding, and your evolutionary path throughout every single lifetime that you have. So when you are assessing Pluto, whether it's looking at transiting Pluto in your natal chart, or whether it's looking at Pluto in a composite relationship chart, Pluto is a very powerful force and figure that will describe a lot of very significant evolutionary turning points in the life of whether it's a couple or whether it's an individual. And I just want to read a couple of things that I found online somewhere, and they're just very good phrases that really capture the energy of Pluto, as Pluto being the soul. So Pluto presents us with choices. Our choices are determined by our desires. The word desire is very much Pluto's arena. Desires reflect our evolutionary state of condition and the reasons for that state of condition. The responsibility for these conditions is our own. There are no victims. Our life situations and experiences reflect our own individual evolutionary needs, conditions, and lessons. Pluto helps us understand how and why we have chosen particular environments, relationships, and situations, and helps us use them to grow. So the thing with Pluto, when Pluto is affecting your chart by a transit, it initially, the other word that's often used in the evolutionary model is the word cataclysmic, which Jeffrey Wolf Green uses extensively throughout his work. When Pluto shows up, it is always a cataclysmic event that takes place in the person's life, because it is that cataclysmic event that can open one up to that possible transformation. Pluto is the agent of transformation. It is the agent of our evolutionary path. And in terms of a composite chart, when you are assessing a relationship and transiting Pluto is hitting certain things off in the composite chart, to me, that is saying that these two souls have possibly been together in a previous life, and or they may be reuniting again in the current life. Now, that's been an experience for me personally, where I had a relationship with somebody many, many years ago, and then that person reappeared years later in my life, and in my composite chart with that person, transiting Pluto was hitting off the Venus in the composite chart when that person reappeared. Now, I don't want to discuss the details of what happened and so on and so forth, because it's not important. But what is important is the point I'm making, which is Pluto brings things back up from the past. Pluto rules the underworld, right? So it is the hidden components of our psyche, really. It is the hidden unconscious desires of our soul that are seen in conditions and circumstances and events that arise in order to trigger the cataclysmic experience, which is not easy, for the purpose of our growth and evolution. And frequently that comes through in relationships, because relationships for most people on the planet are really the area of life that challenges the most. They are the things that bring us the most growth, the most transformation, and the most pain as well. When two people are stepping into a world together and embracing they're bringing both their worlds together, and all the various planetary, energetic, cosmic exchange between them, that has a reaction, that has a strong response. And those strong reactions and responses are the reason and the cause for the challenges, the growth, the pain, the transformation, and so on and so forth. So, I mean, that applies to our own self individually as a soul, as we're, evolving through our life. But it is also there very strongly in the world of relationships, because, as I said, relationships are the thing that challenge us to grow the most. And that's another reason why people stay away from them, which I can understand. The other point I want to make as well is when you're looking at transiting Pluto in relation to the composite chart, the things that you really want to be looking at is transiting Pluto forming an aspect to Mars or Venus in the composite chart. That's going to be primary. That's going to show you that this is a soul union, and this is a soul reunion, in fact, between the two people coming together. It's going to be a very intense, profound connection that will possibly create cataclysmic events and conditions to, you see, Pluto, when Pluto comes in, affecting the composite chart, for instance, it's waking up, it's reawakening some very deep unconscious desires that we have, which are all pertaining to our own evolutionary growth, our soul's evolutionary growth. But the soul has chosen to evolve and undergo these transformations with another soul, hence the relationship forms. Just something else I'd like to read as well. About 80% of our behavior is conditioned by unconscious forces that are tied to the past patterns in identity association. These past patterns are linked to our unconscious emotional security needs, that's Pluto, because of the familiarity that they represent. We automatically gravitate to the old patterns because they are what we already are. Our reliance on old patterns creates stagnation and blocks to further growth. The evolutionary force of the soul induces pressure to eliminate and transform these old patterns into new patterns. The old patterns represent security, the new patterns insecurity. You know, it's when something, and I've said this through many videos, when something is familiar to you in your life, such as a certain behavior that you have, certain beliefs that you have, certain approaches you have to life in general, those approaches or responses that are familiar to you really resonate from the South Node and the Moon. It's the unconscious patterns within us that are familiar to us because we have experienced them in previous lives. So the familiar components in our psyche, in our unconscious components, in our soul's desires are very comfortable for us. But the problem is that they don't enable us to evolve. They don't produce growth. They produce stagnation. And when Pluto recognizes that there is stagnation going on in the person's life, it will then decide to bring in situations, relationships, conditions that basically shake up the person. It'll bring up forces that lie dormant, that are very deep and very unconscious, that really need to rise to the surface so that they can be examined, looked at, transformed, so that the person can be reborn. You know, for something to be reborn in our life, something has to die. And that is the exact point of Pluto's energy. That's exactly what Pluto does. Pluto will not bring transformation without the experience and process of something else dying. And the dying component is really the old conditions and patterns that pertain to past experiences that the soul has actually outgrown. And the soul now is ready to evolve through new experiences, new transformations. So transformation doesn't come easy, is what I'm trying to say. And it will create cataclysmic events in the life in order for the person to wake up, basically. Pluto's ultimate goal is to connect us back to the source and to our soul. The source in this context is referring to the divine, to God, Goddess, whatever you want to call the higher source of all creation. Pluto instigates evolution through a relationship to something higher and more evolved than ourselves. So some other keywords include Pluto is a catalyst for change, for transformation, for catharsis, which is basically another word for healing, therapeutic healing, introspection, emotional shocks, penetrating introspection, internal conflict, death, rebirth, and regeneration. So everything that I've just read out to you, that also applies when you're looking at transiting Pluto to a composite chart, because when two souls come together under the influence of Pluto, these are the themes and issues and conditions that will present in the relationship. In addition to that, it is also, as I said before, it is the reuniting perhaps of two souls coming together that have highly possibly been together in a previous life and or have been together in this life previously. So Pluto is always points to bringing something back from the past. As I said, Pluto rules the underworld. It's the hidden components of our psyche, the hidden components of who we are. It's also hidden treasures and gifts that dwell very, very deeply within us. So whilst there is cataclysmic events and things that emotional shocks that can be experienced through the process of the transformations, there's also the ability to tap into these very deep resources that are gifts that enable us to go through these transformational experiences. So when transiting Pluto is hitting off Venus or Mars, the descendant or ascendant, the vertex in a composite chart, then the relationship begins with that Plutonian energy. It's a soul union. It's a transformational relationship. It will change the people's lives, possibly forever. So it's really one of the most powerful planets you can see hitting off things in a composite chart. And as I said, I've seen it. I've seen it a couple of times in my own life, and you know, I have Venus opposite Pluto natally anyway. So my relationships throughout my life have always been incredibly transformational, and I know the relationships I've been with those people in previous lives, and with almost all of them, well, the long-term ones, I actually know the previous lives I've had with them, the conditions and what the relationships were, and they weren't all an intimate personal relationships. In some, I was siblings with that person. In another one, I was a mother to that person. So it's very, very interesting when you start to explore those dimensions. It's not easy to explore. It takes a lot of work. But astrology is a very good tool that you can use actually for assessing past life conditions with regards to two people and the possible relationship dynamics between them. And that would be looking at the composite chart and looking at the south node in the composite chart. When you have a planet conjunct that south node in the composite chart, that will really highlight and show you something very significant about the past connection between those two people. That is, what sort of relationship they had and the conditions around it. So there's some clues as to how you can start to assess what the connection might have been previously. It also requires a lot of intuition, and it also requires a fair bit of experience working with relationship astrology and composite charts as well, and also synastry too, because when you are looking at synastry, for example, if you know, your Venus is conjunct your partner's south node, that is a pretty clear-cut indication that there's been some kind of love relationship in the past, you know, between you and that person. So there's a lot of different ways to assess various components in synastry and in composite, but the main things always connect to the south node, the moon, and Pluto. In the composite chart, you are also looking at the ascendant descendant axis. Now, I'll just quickly share my screen and just show you Meghan Markle and Prince Harry. Okay, so now this is Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, without a doubt, beyond a shadow of a doubt. This is their composite chart. I'm not going to delineate their composite chart, but what I want to show you is this. If you have a look over here on the right-hand side in the 7th house and the descendant, where I'm hovering my cursor, the right-hand side of the chart, this is the relationship house, the 7th house, the Libran house. And they, in fact, have the natural order of the zodiac, so therefore they have Libra on the 7th house cusp, because their composite chart just happens to be in the natural order of the zodiac. Now, their descendant is 17 Libra, and in their 7th house, they have Saturn and Pluto. That is an incredibly, incredibly tough combination to have in the 7th house of a composite chart. And that, in my mind and in my understanding, that will pose a lot of challenges to this relationship, to this marriage, from outside sources. And, you know, we've already seen it when they first met, the amount of trashing that, you know, the media tried to put out there on Meghan and her background and her family and her father, and just, you know, a lot of terrible things were said about her. That's that 7th house, Pluto, Saturn coming right at the relationship. There's more to it than that, but that's just one example. But what I want you to pay attention to is the 7th house, 17 degrees of Libra, the Saturn-Pluto conjunction in Libra, and the vertex at 15 degrees of Libra. Now, when they met, which was in 2016, October the 31st, is when they first started dating, transiting Pluto was exactly square that vertex in the composite chart. Now, the vertex in our natal chart is a very powerful point It's not a planet, it's not a planetary body, it's a mathematical calculation that is said to describe extremely fated relationships that come into our life. So when we have a really fated relationship, and it's not just intimate relationships, it can be a number of other different types, but it's usually almost always intimate relationships. Something happens to the vertex and it gets triggered, which defines the moment of the union of the two people coming together. That would be seen in the secondary progressed charts of both individuals. But in this composite chart, I find it very interesting that transiting Pluto at the time of their meeting was exactly on the vertex. And the vertex is in Libra, and it looks like it's in the 6th house, but I would pretty much place that right on the descendant. It's conjunct the descendant, which is the 7th house, which is the relationship house of this relationship. So Pluto hitting off that vertex, I think, is very significant. The other thing is it was also square the descendant, so that's pointing to a very fated connection of these two people coming together, a very powerful fated connection because it is square the descendant and it is also square the ascendant. And when they got married, transiting Pluto was well and truly in the 7th house, and it wasn't hitting the Saturn-Pluto because that's not going to come for a couple more years' time. But when transiting Pluto hits off this Saturn-Pluto in the composite chart, I expect that there will be pretty dramatic and pretty difficult things that will happen in this marriage, in this union. And they're not going to be easy, but I think they will survive. They will survive, but yeah, it won't be easy. So that's just a very short, brief example of Meghan and Harry to show what transiting Pluto was doing to their composite chart. So have a look at your own personal charts if you're in a relationship. Have a look at previous relationships. It's a really good way of learning. You know, if you want to understand how this principle works and how powerful it is, you need to just look at chart after chart after chart. That's called practice. That's called learning. So that's what you do. So I'll leave it there for today. I really wanted to make this a pretty quick video, and I will be back with some other goodies, and we'll see what that will be. Hope you're all doing well. Thanks to the new subscribers, and thanks to the ones that have been with me for quite some time. Also, I have a community section that's been opened up in my YouTube channel, and I'm starting to share different kind of videos that all pertain to astrology and spirituality, more or less. Spirituality covers really a lot of different things. So that could be meditation practices, that could be philosophical discussions, could be anything really. So I'm wanting to really build a sense of connection and community with my channel and with the people that follow and support me, and who actually find my videos useful and are learning from them as well. So please engage and connect on the community component of this channel as well. And please feel free to leave your comments and questions below this video if you have any, and just engage with each other as well, because this is a platform for people to share and connect and learn all things pertaining to astrology, and also, even more importantly, all things pertaining to our soul's evolution and growth. That's my aim with these videos. It's about supporting and helping, and just helping us all expand and learn. That includes myself as well. So much love and blessings, and see you guys soon. Thanks. Bye.